We have an amazing lineup of some really cool guests. In this season, I want to totally spotlight law enforcement. We're going to kick it off with Wayne Bullier, who is from the Police Academy across the street, Broward College. So he's going to talk about entry-level training, recruit training, what goes into the curriculum. A whole bunch of other guests that are going to come on that are going to talk about family relationships within police families. And we're going to have our very own dean on, Dr. Durham. Remember, this is the brainchild of Dr. Durham to do investigation with Dr. T. It's her idea. She is going to talk about what is it like to be a mother of a first responder. One of the things that I really hope the audiences will come away with is an understanding and an appreciation and an empathic view of police officers.
So, hi everybody, Dr. Grace Telesco here, and I'm so happy that I have Dr. Freddy Ponce with me tonight. With over 24 years of experience in criminal investigations, interviews and interrogations, and homicide investigations, Dr. Ponce has been involved in the investigation of hundreds of homicide investigation cases, interviewed thousands of witnesses, and has been so successful in his career. And one of the things that I really want to kind of highlight for you is the fact that Dr. Ponce is a graduate. He's an alum of our criminal justice PhD program. So please, everyone, let's welcome Dr. Freddy Ponce. And, like your bio, Freddy, is like so big that I didn't have we would have taken a whole hour for me to read the bio. So if you don't mind, tell the viewers and our students that are watching, and, of course, this is archived right on our YouTube channel, the Fischler College of Education School of Criminal Justice YouTube channel. So it's going to be there forever. And you can always share the link with your students, with your clients, with whoever you want to share it with. And we also noticed that we might get like 20 something views right now live, but then after, like during the week and the weeks to come, we see that it's really very, very widely watched, and a lot of views, a lot of hits. The other thing that I wanted to just say about it is that we have it's graphic nature tonight, like we're talking about homicide. So we want to just put that little warning out there that, we vetted, of course, the slides, and we know that there's nothing that should be too upsetting. However, with any kind of victim or victimization, victim stories, etc., we know that it can trigger the trauma. It could trigger that crisis and that stress reaction. So we want to just, let our viewers know that they don't have to watch it. If anything is happening or everything's being said and it triggers something within you that you're feeling upset about, we don't want to do that. That's not our purpose. Our purpose of the podcast, by the way, after the podcast is over tomorrow, our amazing production team will be uploading everything to Spotify. So not only is it live as a video podcast, but it's also on Spotify. And so people can listen to you as you talk about the intricacies of a homicide investigation. But without any further ado, tell us a little bit about you, a little bit about what attracted you to law enforcement, to be an investigator, to get involved in homicide. And then I would love for you to just give a little shameless plug about why were you attracted to NSU's School of Criminal Justice PhD program, and anything you want to say about that. And then we can get right into your case. So tell us you and your Leo experience, what attracted you to all of that. And what made you like this homicide expert, which you are. And I think that you've been on documentaries, haven't you?
On many documentaries. This specific case that we're actually going to see tonight was profiled by Dr. Sanjay Gupta on CNN, called Anatomy of a Murder. I was 13 seasons at the first 48, Miami, and did some other documentaries overseas as well. But thank you for inviting me to your show. It's an honor. I recall attending many times as a student of NSU, and I enjoyed it very much, especially your missing persons episodes that you did.
Unfound. You're an
Oh,
unfound fan.
yeah,
Excellent.
yes, very, very good, very good. Yes, yes.
But Freddie, tell
Um,
us what attracted you to law enforcement.
I have to say that this happened at a very young age. When I was 19 years old, I was very much intrigued into finding out why it is that people confess to the police, or how is it that the police are able to persuade people to talk about their secrets that they would not normally tell anybody else. And that intrigued me a lot. And with the great fortune of luck that I've had in my life, at that age, a friend of a friend gave me a job as a private investigator, and they were the friends that sent me to my first interrogation school. And what I did was just chase cheating men all over Miami and interviewing witnesses of missing kids and fraud cases, and I became pretty proficient at it. And then I decided I think I should probably take this to the next level. And I was always interested in working in a special victims unit. I thought those are the worst criminals of all, and that's what I wanted to do. I felt I needed some more experience in life, so I left off to the military. I was gone there for 4 years. When I came back, I applied to the police department at the City of Miami Police Department. 3 years after that, then I applied within the investigations unit to try to get into the sex offender investigations unit. And there was only one opening and 20 applicants, so I did not make it. I tried several times and did not make it. And then there was opening at the homicide unit. And since I've had this previous law enforcement experience and I was proficient at conducting interviews, I did pretty good on my board interview. So I was selected to join the homicide team, and then I worked. They sent me straight to the midnight unit, and then I worked 5 more years after that during the day shift. But luck would have it again that the only other investigators that worked the midnight unit at the police department, other than homicide, were the special victims unit. So I had the best of both worlds. They taught me everything there was about SVU and allowed me to interrogate their offenders, and I taught them about death investigations. And we became all very good friends. And then my final 4 years of my 24 years there, I became a law enforcement instructor. And that led into my business now, where I travel around the world training law enforcement investigators on anything A to Z that has anything to do with death investigation and crime scene. And I had an incredible career, and I still do. I'm still involved in assisting families of victims of homicide. They contact me. They know that the police are investigating, but they need a liaison to help them understand what's going on the law enforcement side.
I
Yeah.
love that. And you're not only an investigator, so you're like the perfect poster child, if you will, for the compassionate, empathic investigator who utilizes crisis intervention and psychological first aid. I've been talking about that a little bit with my victimology class, so they're sort of familiar with. But I love that you're talking about the families, near and dear to my heart. Of course, my 9/11 work was all with families of the victims who had succumbed to the World Trade Center attack. So I love that you're saying all of that. You're making it real. This is why we like to do this show, and we like to do the field experiences, because we like to bridge the gap between what they're taught, what
Yeah.
our students are taught in a textbook and in a classroom, and the real world. And so you're putting it right here, right in their face. I love it that the importance of victimology, the importance of an empathic approach toward victims and victims' families. I love that. So, Freddie, tell us
I
a
have
little.
to, I'm going to get into the NSU part that you're asking about, but you're
Yep.
specifically highlighting something that makes homicide investigators so successful here in the United States, different than what's happening in other countries, is that we get the families of victims involved in the investigation because they're resourceful. They know the victim the best, and they are extra amount of people that can help us with hands and any resource or logistics. And it gets them, they have a connection with the police that they need instead of being isolated. And we've probably heard many times where police are not really telling us anything. We don't know what's going on, but that's not exactly the case. So we definitely are involved with families. Yes.
Great.
Uh,
And so
yeah.
here's this famous, very famous homicide investigator. And I know our students are like, salivating from this because that's like what they want, right? That they want to be you. So why would somebody who's so successful as a homicide investigator and an expert in homicide investigations need a PhD? And what made you become attracted to us for your
Yes.
PhD?
Right. So I'm not only PhD NSU, but I'm also Masters of Forensic Psychology NSU. And that's led the pathway to that. I became extremely interested in the forensic psychology program because of the work that forensic psychologists do. In my world of homicide investigator, I have to encounter criminals with mental health disorders, and I have to know how to approach them and speak to them correctly. For me to do that, I have to think like a forensic psychologist, how they interview people in the inmates or in the courthouses or when they're being treated and how all of that works. The PhD program, my behavioral science track, as well as the master's program, introduced me in more detail about the DSM-5, the Diagnostics Manual, Statistical Diagnostic Manual for Mental Health Disorders, which is my favorite book to understand and read so much about because I'm able to interact with people who have these deficiencies, and it just so happens that they are criminals as well. Once they know that you care about them or care about their disorder or understand what their problem is and what led to their crime, they're more open to speaking to you. If you don't have that knowledge, it's very hard to enter their mind and speak to them. So it was a great experience. You were one of my professors. I enjoyed your class very much, and the methods class, and it was a great experience. I still use the knowledge that I've learned at forensic psychology masters and the PhD program daily. I use it now.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, so without any further ado, please, I know everyone is waiting to hear about this amazing case. And so please take it away and you can share your screen with us, please.
Sure. I know that you okay, share.
Yep, we see it. Great.
Okay, very good. You mentioned earlier that there's probably some of your students from victimology. This case is very big on victimology, and I'll tell you a little bit about this case. And before I begin, so your viewers can understand that every crime has a pre-crime phase, a during crime phase, and a post-crime phase. In any crime that's committed, even if it's IT, AI, Bitcoin, whatever it is, there is thinking involved prior to the crime occurring, while the crime is occurring, and after the crime occurs, there is post-action from the offender, or if the victim is still alive, they're still telling stories of the victim. So keeping that in mind as we go through this, you'll understand what needs to happen prior to the crime occurring. So if you're in a criminal law class, you understand what happens pre-crime. People plan. The more planning there's involved gives us more intent, what we need for statutes of charges of crimes to be applied. In pre-crime also lives motive. When there is planning involved, there's a reason for it, there might be a motive. At pre-crime phase, we understand that there's a mental state of the offender prior to the crime occurring, and it may also change during the crime occurs, right? So we keep all that in mind as we watch this. This is a Sunday morning. I was an on-call homicide investigator where I was home that weekend. This was on a Sunday morning. And when you're on call, you're basically called to come in because you're up for the next case. So you have to come in from wherever you are. You have to respond within 1 hour. The victim lived alone in the bottom floor of apartment number 5. And on Friday night, he normally sweeps and cleans the apartment outside and the parking lot. He's given a discount by the owner of the building, and he kind of manages the place. He is also a bus driver for his church, where he goes and picks up homeless people and takes them to church. And he also does the same on Wednesday nights, where he picks up homeless people and takes them to Bible study as well. He was last seen Friday night cleaning up the area, and then on late night, about 11 o'clock at night, Friday into the Saturday morning hours, was seen leaving the property in his vehicle. So this is the victim's vehicle, was parked facing his apartment. Apartment number 5 is on the opposite side of it. You can see through the glass here, this rear glass there, that club. Maybe Dr. Telesco and I may remember that. I don't know if anybody knows what a club is, but you could put it on the steering wheel and it locks the steering wheel. What that tells me is that it's somebody who's adhering to the vehicle, that wants the vehicle safe. That tells me that it was the owner that was driving the car, and somebody else was there in the passenger side. All right. Now, the vehicle that's to the right is the Cadillac there. We send another investigator to knock on doors and ask questions to we can get more witnesses or leads and tell us that they had seen the victim, Mr. Clark, arrive with another male in the passenger seat and then walk over to the corner store, come back to his mailbox, and then enter his apartment. Now, I want to specifically show you this picture because there's an error in this picture. There's a problem with this picture, a crime scene problem. These are the patrol officers who, when I arrived, I observed this, and a picture was already taken of it. Crime scene had already taken a picture as the crime scene is. We should not be touching the vehicle with any crime scene tape. So what do we do with this picture? We have to keep the picture and present it to the prosecution, and it's entered into discovery and shown exactly how it is. We would not even think of hiding the picture and taking another picture with a new scene already, removing the tape from touching the car. We just cannot do that. But I need to show you that these errors do happen in law enforcement. Not everybody's perfect, and we have to own it. And I was the one that had to own it because I was the lead in the case, and I answer for everybody who's assisting me in the case. All right, so this is apartment number 5 in front of the victim's home. If you're writing a search warrant for an apartment, or let's make a decision here if we need a search warrant or not. For no expectation of privacy, all right? If the victim lived alone in his apartment and no one else lived there, we do not need a warrant to go in because the victim has already died in the apartment. He's a victim of a homicide. The neighbors were Sunday morning, Saturday, they didn't see him. Sunday, they were a bit concerned, and they came to the door, that gate door that opens from right to left and out, and found the gate open. And his door in the front was also open. You see that there's a towel behind the black gate. The neighbor went inside to calling for him, did not hear anything, went to the bedroom and found the victim face down with his hands tied behind his back and his ankles and his legs tied up. He stepped outside and then he called the police. So when we arrive in the scene, there is conversation with us and family members that may have been called or people there. We want to know, does he live with anybody else? We need to know if we're going to get a warrant or not. If there is no expectation of privacy, that means that no one else lives there, then we don't need a warrant. If somebody else did live there and they were not there, then we need to get a warrant. But being the cautious homicide investigators that we are, we will still get a warrant because it's such a serious issue. In case anything happens later, we are covered by a judge who has reviewed the warrant as well as a prosecutor. All right. So we see now this is the black gate. We see that there is a break, but it's not a break in, it is a break out. What that tells us is that the offender was locked in. We could say that the victim did not do this because he would have had the key. And that tells us that the offender did not have the key or could not find the key wherever it was. All right. So before entering any crime scene, you pause at the threshold of the door and you consume what you're looking at. You don't just rush in there with crime scene people. So what we could see is obviously two chairs, a lot of pictures on the walls. That tells us if there's family pictures on the walls, those are friendly to our victim, people we need to talk to. To the right and to the back, you see some curtains there. It leads to the hallway, to a bathroom. And behind the wall that you see in front of you is the bedroom for the victim. To the right is the living room, and to the left is the kitchen. So I'm still standing at the threshold. I see to the right a bicycle. There's a coffee table with some ornaments and things like this. So my one concern is there an issue here in this living room? Did something occur here? Was there a struggle or a fight? I don't think so. I didn't think so at the time. What was important to me is I see additional pictures, more people that are friendly to the victim, people I need to talk to. He was divorced and had a daughter and a son. To the back, we see that wicker chair, and there's a ball cap there. That's interesting to me because we can obtain DNA from that ball cap. And to the right, where the bicycle is at, there's another wicker chair exactly like that one right by the door. As you look at this coffee table, there's some coffee mugs and there's some sunglasses and an ashtray. Very interesting to me because I can obtain fingerprints and DNA on both of those. And then you see that curtain back there leading to the hallway to the bathroom. So this is that extra wicker chair to the right. So we see the butter knife and there's a bolt. So it looks like he was able to was looking for something to try to get his way out and found the knife and unscrewed that bolt. So both of these are very interesting to me for evidence purposes, fingerprinting and DNA as well. There's another picture is taken with evidence markers. So this is now to the left. As you notice that in the living room, it wasn't disturbed. It was organized. Here we see something different. It's not telling of the victim. This is not the victim's way. When we think of victimology, we think of what are the habits and routines of the victim so we can understand the offender and what his needs were and why he selected the victim. So here we see something different. This is not telling of the victim himself. So we see that these cabinet doors are open, important for evidence for me. We see a paper towel roll on top. We see where the silverware is at, possibly where he picked up that butter knife and was desperately searching for something. I imagine he was looking for tools as he was doing this. And there's a trash can in every trash bin. You got to lift up the bag and look at what's under in case there's something hidden. So this is the other part of the kitchen. I look to the right and I see this area is good. This is not disturbed. It's organized to me, more telling of the victim. To you and me or any other person, maybe this refrigerator is too old. I would never have a refrigerator like that. But you know what? It was a working refrigerator and the victim liked it. He didn't have a problem with it. What's more telling of the victim, how organized his mail is. It's not disturbed. So I don't think that there was any struggle or any problems here in this kitchen area. So we see this, obviously we sent these sunglasses to the laboratory. They were swabbed for DNA, and in that ashtray, there were some cigarette butts. The witnesses and family members said the victim did not smoke, but he did have friends that would come over to watch football games. He would leave the black gate closed, but the door open, and people would walk by and know that he was sitting there watching TV on the game. So those two pieces of evidence were sent for DNA. So I don't know if you could see my mouse, Dr. Telesco, but I'm gonna put up here is that we're actually found the keys to the apartment behind this picture here. And this is why the offender could not find the keys, because the victim had a habit of hiding his keys after he locked the door. And they were behind that picture, the frame there. He also would hide his watch. So he was not able to take the victim's watch because he just didn't know to see it or find it. There's another view from the threshold of the hallway out to the front door, and the kitchen is all the way over there to the right. So this is a little bit different now. This is the hallway that's leading to the bedroom is to the left, with that marker on the floor, number 9, and the bathroom in the front. And it looks like there's some desperation here. When I see hangers on the floor, that tells me that the offender took the victim's clothing. We normally see this in burglaries and in homicide cases where the offender was either cut or had some blood on him, or something happened that he had to dress himself again or look different to cover something up. We see some toolboxes that are open. So it looked like there was some desperate situation here where he was looking for some tools. So here you see the black box. That's where the victim was laying face down. He had a bed sheet covering his head, had his hands tied behind his back with a bathrobe belt, and his feet and ankles were tied with a leather belt. On the floor is a paper towel with blood on it. When the neighbors came in, they found the mattress covering his body. This is telling of us when we normally see cases like this where the offender covers the victim's body. It tells us that there is some remorse from the offender, where this is not how I wanted to see you. He was wearing different clothing here than when he arrived. He was wearing a white t-shirt and boxer shorts. This gives us a better angle of the bedroom. It looks like there was some ransacking, pulling of drawers, and his folded clothing, telling us a bit more about the victim. When he would wash and dry his clothing, he would fold them neatly and put them in the drawer, and now are there all on top of the bed. So there's some ransacking after the victim was dead. So it's interesting to know, how is it possible that the victim's hands are tied behind his back and his ankles? Why would the offender do that? Why would he need to do that? And there are several options, but the one that made the most sense is that he made the victim unconscious when he did that. And then that's the only way that he could physically be able to do that, when the victim is unconscious. The victim suffered several blows to the face, and his hyoid bone on his neck was fractured, telling us there was significant strangulation involved. So this is additional evidence of DNA that is telling me that it is possible that the offender was cut somehow and went back to the kitchen, got some paper towel to clean his hands. I also found a streak of blood on a shirt that the victim was wearing where his hands, or near his hands where they were bound. So it's possible that the offender was injured as he was tying him up. He streaked the back of his t-shirt. So this is the victim, Mr. Clark. He was 62 years old. And that's the location of where the homicide occurred as well. So he arrived in this vehicle, walked to the convenience store before he entered the apartment. This is Mr. Clark in the black t-shirt in the front, had a gold chain on. He did not have that gold chain on him when we found him, and we could not find the gold chain anywhere in the apartment. We see the person behind them was with the sunglasses on top of his head. They went in, bought a pack of cigarettes, and went back to the apartment again. So obviously we have to do a lot with this picture, try to locate the offender and show it to many people to see if he can be identified. This is at the medical examiner's office. This was the bed sheet that was covered over his face. So after he tied him up, he covered his face. This will make you think is like, what are the charges now that we are thinking? Did he intend to kill him prior to entering the apartment, or did something go wrong and then he dies on the offender? If he's tying him up, why would he tie him up? If he wants him dead, he would just kill him and not tie him up. He would tie him up because he thinks the offender is still alive and would wake up at some point, and he wouldn't want him to wake up while he's ransacking the location. But he suffered so much injury that he ends up suffocating the victim, and the victim dies. This is the belt that was wrapped around his arms behind his back. When you arrive at the medical examiner's office, you arrive with crime scene investigators, and the homicide investigators attends the autopsy. And this belt has to be cut and tied together where it was cut, and then taken to the laboratory for further examinations. So we sent off the sunglasses and cigarette butts, and we were able to get a positive match of DNA profile, male profile, into the DNA database, and it came back to this individual. When he's got a history of burglary cases, and he's also has a bipolar mental health disorder. When you go to a mental health hospital here in South Florida, it's at North Shore Hospital, you need to get there, and then the nurses or the staff there run a background check on you before you're able to obtain the medication that's given to you. There is where they contacted police, and they saw that there is a warrant that I entered into the system for his arrest because of the DNA match that I had. So it took me about a month later. We did actually find him, locate him, and now we have to take pictures of him to see if there are any injuries on him, because this was a close contact homicide case where there was a physical contact between the offender and the victim. I want to see if the victim was able to injure him in any kind of way, and I'm looking for some other injuries that interest me because there's evidence on the scene. Wouldn't get a close-up picture. Obviously, we would take like about 15 to 20 pictures of them close up and all sides and everything, but to see if there are any injuries. So my interest here is, of course, there's a scuffle and there's blood on the victim's shirt and there's blood on the paper towel, and I want to see his hands. I want to see if he's injured. When I asked him to see his hand, the back of his hands, he refused to show me the back of his hands. He would only show me the palms of his hand. So after much persuasion and asking, he threw himself to the ground and did not want to show me his hands. I kept telling him that he needed to show me his hands, or I would have to get a warrant and forcing me to show me his hands. In any warrant, the judge writes, or it's written in the warrant, by any means necessary, you will obtain the evidence that you need. That gives us the power to get the evidence. So he decided to do it on his own. He opened his hands, and there is the knuckle injury that he had received. Got my trusty forensic ruler that I had nearby. Funny story about that. We can talk about it later. But we documented that. When we asked him for his DNA, we have to swab his DNA. It's a two-part test. Just because it's in the database doesn't mean that it's going to be a match. We have to physically go back a second time and get his DNA and then make the match. So he refused to give us his DNA swab. We went to the judge again, wrote a new warrant for his DNA, and the judge granted it, and we were able to get his DNA, and we got the match. So turns out pretty good case. I believe he was sentenced. I think he pled to 29 years or something like this. Yep. That's it.
All right. Wow. Okay. So that was really remarkable. And I really love the way you like totally laid that out for everyone. And you made it so simple too. A lot of the different like nuances of an investigation and a crime scene. I think you really brought it to life for us in a very simple to understand way. So I appreciate that. Great, good job. Um, let's see. Do we have any questions? It looks like Bailey has a question, so I'm going to ask for Eddie and Cameron to come on. I think is is Cameron going to be responsible for any of the questions in the webinar? And then we have Eddie maybe looking at the YouTube. I'm not sure. So you guys tell me what you want to do. Go ahead, Eddie. You popped in first. So tell us. What are you doing?
I already have the YouTube pulled up, so if Cameron wants to handle the webinar.
All right, good. So why don't we do YouTube first, since you're on first, you popped in first, and then Cameron can handle the two questions by Bailey in the webinar. Go ahead.
As of right now, we actually don't have any YouTube questions.
Do you have any questions, Eddie?
Do I have any questions? Gosh. I can't think of any coming to my mind right now. That's okay.
Yeah, you're
still
fine.
processing.
You're good. Okay, cool. So Cameron, you've got two questions right here in the webinar. Go ahead.
Yes, okay. So Bailey's first question is, can you explain the importance of witness statements in an investigation?
Oh, very good question. Yes. So obviously our goal is to our goal is always to find the truth, not to try to get a confession from an offender, right? So one, we have to establish first, was there even a crime committed at any location? All right. So witness statements are very important, and we have to be careful who's accusing what of who of what crime. So we're going to listen to the witness statement, obviously, right? And we want to know, one, were they actually there? Did they actually see what they saw or heard what they heard? So any statement that any witness says to claim that they know something, the first question is, how do you know that to be true? And they should be telling you, I was the first person there, or I saw, or I heard. Or if not, they will tell you that they know because they heard it from somebody else. But it has to be clear if they are the persons who are going to give you some probable cause. The good thing about witness statements and victim statements for victims that are alive is the police have already arrived at the crime scene. They know the crime scene. They studied it. They know it well. When they ask questions of the witness, we want to elicit from a witness what they know about the crime scene. And if they were able to tell us the same information that we know, then that adds credibility to the witness. So some witnesses are direct witnesses, meaning that they can give us probable cause and add information to the case. The more witnesses we interview, the better it is for us, of course. So we have to enter very delicate with the witness to make sure that they are not falsely accusing someone of a crime that they not commit. So they must be interviewed thoroughly, of course.
Lovely.
Thank you for that question.
And I do have another question from Bailey. She asks, how do you handle the emotional impact of working with working on a homicide case?
And years of working. Very good question. It's not easy, I have to say. It's very difficult. But I could say what has helped me throughout the years dealing with vicarious trauma, being a witness to tragedy. For 15 years of my life, within homicide, I saw death every single day of my working life. I not only handled homicide cases, murder cases, but suicides and natural death cases. And we had natural death cases every single day. Old people just die every day, and we have to go and see them. So you have to balance your life, take vacations, and live happy memories. Because if you don't, the memories that you have are the traumatic ones that you live. So if you can replace the space and time of your day with happy memories, they replace the old bad ones. And that's how I got through it. And it helped me a lot. So go on vacation, ask for hours off, and get out and have a good time. And you'll always have good memories in your head rather than the bad ones.
And I want to just add a little something here, just from my own experience, that sometimes my desire to be empathic, my desire to be compassionate, my desire to help the victim, you know, the fact that I'm aware of, you know, trauma informed practice. You know, I'm a big fan of that. Now I'm not a big fan of trauma, but I am a big fan of seeing that almost everything is informed by it. And that, you know, we see things around us today where we're like, how could that person act that way? How can that person do that heinous crime that person committed? But I do believe that it's an injury, it's a trauma that they have not healed, that they have not transformed, that they have not looked at. And, you know, that whole old hurt people kind of thing. So I think that trauma is definitely, you know, permeates all of this, whether it's the offender or the victim or the victim's family. And I think I did say this in my victimology class. You know, the victim of a homicide, well, they don't have to deal with the trauma because they've passed on, right? They're in the spirit realm. But the family that's left with that hole, the family that's left with that tragedy, and like in the case of 9/11, where they didn't even have remains, that the family couldn't even hold on to that for so many families. And I think that there was a danger for me personally as a responder, letting it all in, letting it get to me too much, you know, too much. I was like, I opened up my heart and I let these families in as though they were my own. But that was detrimental in the end for me. You talked about vicarious trauma. You talk about, you know, vicarious victimization. All of that is what first responders and investigators have to deal with, and people don't even realize it. Can you comment on that?
Yeah, it was, you know, it was a decision the decision to involve family members to help us in investigations, um, that we had to understand that being emotional with the family is going to hurt us. We have to get close to them so they can help us in the investigation, and then for them to know that the police is present and we are here to answer whatever questions that we could, because there are certain types of questions that or information that we cannot release. But for us to get in that proximity, yeah, we're that emotion does affect us. So, and we have to have a balance, and to be able to deal with it is it's something that you constantly work on it. So we found as homicide team members that the more we spoke about what we were feeling, or the more that we talked as a group of what we observed and let it out, tell somebody what you just observed and what you just experienced. It's like anything else, you're just like releasing the pressure, and we found that to help a lot.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, no, I want to echo that, how important it is to get it out, to talk about it, to ventilate. You know, we talked about this in our victimology class, you know, that you allow the victim to ventilate, to tell the story. You validate what they're feeling. You validate that they're having sort of an appropriate reaction to an inappropriate event, right? So that, like, when trauma happens, when a critical incident occurs, we react in a certain way and we think we're crazy in the way we're reacting. You know, post 9/11, post being involved in a shooting, post whatever, your your startle response, all of those things, your insomnia, all of those symptoms. It's like, don't beat yourself up, validate that that's normal for an abnormal kind of event.
Yeah, it's speaking, it's speaking to victims of sexual abuse. We're trained to be very careful in the words that we use when we speak to them. And just to remind everyone, the first person that a live victim speaks to in a formal type setting or a long conversation is going to be the police. They're brought to the police
Exactly.
station, or they're taken to a rape victim treatment center, and we're the first ones to speak to them. So we always have to be cautious of, am I going to re-traumatize this person? I think to some extent that's going to always be true, because we're eliciting the information that they just witnessed.
Exactly.
So if we're going to do it, we might as well do it quick, get as much information as you can right away, so we're not going back to the victim over and over again. Can you tell me the story again? Can you tell me the story again? These are issues that have law enforcement officers and investigators in other countries where they get a case file and they hand it off to somebody new, and then that person starts the work all over again. And then there where we see, we can all get re-traumatized by it. But talk about it. Good memories, go on a lot of vacations, and don't keep it in. Don't keep it in.
Good. Excellent. Cameron, I think you've got a couple more. Maybe Eddie can help you out, because otherwise it's all on you.
Yeah, sure. I'll do one more and I'll leave the last.
Okay. All right, great.
Julian asked, how long did the investigation you presented take?
That investigation, we found him a month afterwards. That crime scene was held for, I'm going to say, 2.5 days, because once the police identifies a crime scene, we are in complete control of it. There's evidence, and it belongs to the state. The apartment will be taken over with a warrant, and we can secure that until we secure as much evidence as we can. So the processing of the scene took some time. We fingerprinted that entire apartment. So it was 2.5 days. I had to go interview members of the church group, his bosses, learn of his bus route, where he could potentially have gone to pick up the offender. In his statement was that he was at a location under a bridge, and he knew that victim would go by there and pick up homeless people to take them to the church, and he had already befriended him in the past. So that's what happened to him. The victim ended up picking him up and brought him back to his apartment. But initially, always the first 3 or 4 days, and if you've heard before, the first 48 hours of any case is where the most important evidence is at. So that we collect the evidence and the information. The strongest leads comes in the first 48, but really, the more the leads that come in, we are staying in the office. So I think I recall it's about 4 days straight of nonstop, sleep very little, get all the witnesses, all the information, and DNA took some time. DNA took about to come back. I think that was about 3 weeks for the DNA to come back with a hit from the database. And in some occasions, it takes much longer. It can even take up to a year, depending on the long list of cases that the Miami-Dade County Laboratory was processing evidence. Good question.
Great. Eddie, do you want to ask the last two? Natalia has a question, and Isabella.
I will say we did also get questions in on the YouTube.
Uh-oh. Okay. Well, we have a few minutes left, so we could do it.
Let's see. Trying to see if I can combine some of these. Okay. So from the YouTube, Ashley Martinez asked, how long do homicide investigations usually take? And what are some factors that contribute to solving a homicide case quickly versus ones that remain unsolved or take years?
Yeah, the you know, with the new technology that's involved now, homicide cases are being solved. AI is helping a lot. Cameras are helping a lot as well. A lot of cameras from businesses, cameras on the highways, cameras in the cities. They're identifying the route of the offenders in and out of the crime scene. Obviously, any case that has any biological evidence helps us a lot. DNA is very important. Mitochondrial DNA is very important. And a great crime scene investigator that can lift great fingerprints help. So the faster that we identify the person, then the hunt is on to try to locate them. So the difficulties come in witness testimony, good interviewing of witnesses that are there to tell the truth, and identify when somebody is telling the truth or not is very, very important to get a solid witness. But yeah, anything with DNA evidence is pretty good to solve. When you don't have a witness and you don't have any evidence on scene, it becomes very difficult, and you need the skills of an investigator that can get somebody to confess. Good question. Good question.
Can we do like maybe one or two more?
Let me see. Okay. So someone asked, is there a way to train the eye to look for a specific type of evidence in these photos or scenes? And then to kind of combine that with another question, someone else asked, what type of evidence is most important in solving a homicide investigation?
Yes. Good question. So yeah, identifying evidence on the scene. We always we want to work with the experts, right? So the crime scene investigators. If there are some homicide investigators in other agencies, police agencies, that they do not have crime scene investigators, so they do it all themselves. I'll give an example, like the Texas Rangers. They are full body one person. They do everything. Here in South Florida, we have the luxury of having a separate unit of crime scene investigators and the homicide investigators, and we all go as a team together, right? So I specifically took it upon myself to educate myself and go to all the crime scene schools the nation offers. But any evidence is good evidence. Anything that you can identify is good. So what I want to do during crime phase is when we arrive at the crime scene, that's during the phase of when the crime occurred. I want to try to visualize the steps that the offender took and go through that area, that anything that they may have touched that could have fingerprints or DNA. And if it's a close contact wound like the one we saw today, the injuries that the evidence that the victim has are important to me. Under the fingernails, DNA type of thing, or any injuries that the victim had soak in the offender. So yeah, any close contact, that's a great case for evidence.
Great. Let's do one more. Did we get Isabella's the webinar in the webinar? Isabella?
No. Okay.
All right, let's end with Isabella's question.
What are your best practices for investigating cases in which the offender has mental health struggles and illnesses?
Yeah, when we do meet the offender, we have to be careful when we go interview them, because there are specific constitutional laws that we have to abide by, and we have to be careful when we're interviewing somebody that they are able to communicate with us. We have to identify if they're able to communicate with us or not. And we have to know, try to understand from the investigation, what was their mental state prior to the crime occurring, the mental state when the crime was occurring, and their mental state when I am actually speaking to the offender. And as you know from your forensic psychology classes, the mental state later on at the courthouse, or we're doing proceedings, that's another mental state that has to be determined. So me interviewing the offender, I need to know if they can communicate with me or not. If they understand where they are and who they are speaking to, then I'm able to proceed with a conversation, a normal speaking conversation. And they have to understand how I speak. I have to be mindful of my language, of my educational level, and I have to speak at a level where I am understood at an educational level, right? If I cannot get past that test, then I probably will not be able to have speak to them. But I have to prove mental state. I have to show mental state to the prosecution, let them know who we're dealing with, and they'll decide amongst, prosecutors and defense attorneys in the courts if it's going to be reasoned by insanity or not. That was a good question.
Good question. Good question. Thank you, Eddie. Thank you, Cameron, both of you, for being here. And thank you, Dr. Ponce, so much for joining us tonight for this
Thank you to
really
everybody.
interesting, exciting, all of our true crime folks, they just love this. They love it.
They might be back. We'll talk about another case.
Okay, I'd love that. I would love
Had a
that.
great
For
time. I had a
sure.
great time.
For sure. And I know that our students are going to be seeing more of you as time goes on. So thank you so much, Dr. Ponce. Any last words from you?
Everybody be happy. Go on vacation. Have a great time.
That's great. Thank you so much for being here with us. We so appreciate you and for you taking the time out. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Go Sharks.
Go Sharks. Yes. # Sharks. So thank you everybody for joining. We want to thank our deans, of course, for always supporting everything that we do here. Next week, Eddie, I know that you probably have this, Eddie or Cameron, you have this in the top of your head. I know I'm sure. But next week.
I believe we're off until the 13th, if I'm correct.
Really?
So our next show is March 13th because midterms and then spring break.
Oh, excellent. I'm glad you said that. So we have 2 Thursdays that are well, what shall we do with our time on a Thursday night if we're not doing this? Interesting. Okay, cool.
Midterms.
So, but tell me midterm. So bless you on that. Make sure you study hard and you do well on those. And then spring break, be careful. Don't do anything crazy. And what do we have March 13th? Is it March 13th?
Yeah, we have Lieutenant Patricia Ravine.
Ah. So we have the married cops.
Yeah.
A married cops show. That'll be fun. That'll be fun. All right, everybody. Take care. Have a wonderful spring break, and we'll see you on the 13th when we're back live.